Okay. Welcome back for another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. I am your host, Kristen Goss, with KWG Family Legal and Mediation Services. I am the founder and owner, and we are your knowledgeable, warm, and gracious attorneys. We are back with a very special guest, my good friend and colleague, Lenny Skylawer. Thank you for being here with me, Lenny.
My pleasure, Kristen. My pleasure.
Yes. And so I would like for you to share with the audience a little bit about your personal journey. You are a life insurance guru.
Thank you.
Any question about life insurance, he's your guy. But I want you to share with the audience a little bit about your journey personally and then how you ended up into life insurance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have been in the insurance world for almost 14 years. So it's my second career.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was a business owner of a manufacturing company for many years. And when I got out of that business, I went back to my roots. So I went to the University of Florida back when in the 1970s, and my major was finance and insurance. And I always knew enough to do the planning and use the right solutions for myself. And so I took what was sort of my hobby and made it into a business where I'm fully licensed, not only for insurance, but also for investments as well.
What made you really get into that? Were you just interested in finances?
Yes, I was always interested in finances. And back when as well, there's always been a particular tax benefit to insurance, depending on how it's structured. And so I always felt that taking advantage of the law, you being as an attorney, our role is to take advantage of the written law. And that was a great opportunity. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. So being in the industry for so long, I'm sure you've heard a lot of myths. And so my question to you would be, what are some of the top maybe 2 myths that you've heard people say about life insurance?
Okay, sure. So first and foremost, negative news, negative information resonates more than positive. So consequently, when things are said that are negative, more people are going to respond to it. So you go to a restaurant for 10 meals, everything is perfect. The 11th meal is bad. You're going to talk about the 11th meal. So one of the myths about life insurance is specifically deals with whole life insurance, where a lot of people like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman will discuss how bad it is for you. But if you look at the large corporations, in this world, they do the opposite. Actually, I brought, so for example, the largest banks, the Bank of America right now has $24 billion in cash value life insurance. Wells Fargo is $19 billion. JP Morgan Chase is $12 billion in cash value life insurance. Truist has $7 billion in cash value life insurance. And I always say banks know what to do with their money, with your money, because they're taking your money and investing it in cash value life insurance policies. So if it's good enough for the banks, maybe it's something that you ought to consider.
That's a good point.
So that's one myth. Another myth is that you don't need it. In other words, my family can take care of themselves. And while there may be some exceptions to the rule, the way that real well-to-do families have gone from generation to generation is by leveraging and using a penny paid in a life insurance policy is going to pay dollars. And because it's a tax-free benefit, it just creates legacy wealth. So those are 2 items that And finally, even though you said 2, the third one is, if life insurance and whole life specifically was so bad and negative, why have these policies been around for almost 200 years?
Doing something right. Must be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, is it for everyone? No. So it's on a case-by-case situation, depending on the client's goals and objectives. And it's interesting because everything that I provide my clients, there's no need to it. It's a want. Do you want to protect your family? Do you want to take advantage of the tax law? And so forth and so on. So that's the way I approach, my practice.
I like that. Very practical.
Try to be.
Yes.
Try to be.
So as you stated earlier, I am, as you know, a divorce attorney as well as estate planning. And what have been some of the scenarios, because there's a lot of crossover between what you do in life insurance and helping and assisting the families in a more holistic way. So let's start with the family law side. What have been certain circumstances where you've seen life insurance come into play that would be beneficial for the family?
Absolutely. So in the most simplest term, if two individuals are getting divorced, especially if there's children involved, life insurance is a way of, in the event of something negative happening to either one, of at least protecting the kids and making sure that they can live their life out, whether it's in their home, education, or what have you. So I encourage divorcing parties to get policies. They could be term. They don't necessarily have to be cash valued, and making sure that they're protecting each other and having the insured not be the owner of the policy, but having the spouse that they're getting divorced being the owner. That way the policies can always stay in force. But having it documented in the divorce decree that at the end of the commitment, let's say the child support, then the ownership can go back to the insured.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I get a lot of times, I don't want to have life insurance and paying when I'm, my ex-spouse is the beneficiary. So essentially you're saying that the person who's paying is the person who is also going to be the owner.
Could be, not necessarily though.
Okay.
So in the divorce decree, you can have the person that's insured being responsible for the premiums. However, the other spouse would be the owner in the event that there was a default in the premiums. They would be made aware.
Okay.
So that the policy doesn't expire.
So that's
or lapse
extra
per
protection.
se. So it's an additional level of protection and control, and you can do that, each other. In other words, you can sort of counter each other. So that's one way. Doesn't have to be structured that way, but that is a consideration per se. So that's one. Another one that sometimes slips through the cracks is when someone has a responsibility of making the child support payments. What would happen if they were sick or injured and they couldn't work for an extended period of time? Well, life insurance won't help there, but disability income protection would. And I'm not talking about short term. I'm talking about if they can't work for 60, 90 days or more. It's a misnomer that the industry refers to it as disability income insurance, because disability is really not the main trigger for claims. It's illness. So they call it disability, but it's really, God forbid, someone has a heart attack and they can't work for 9 months, or they have cancer and they have treatments and they can't work for 2 years. So that to me is really just as important as the life insurance. And the statistics are that over 25% of people will have some sort of claim.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Another point is certain carriers regarding long-term care, and sometimes people think that they should wait until they're older, but in all insurances, it's based on your age and it's based on your health. So the younger you are, the healthier you're probably going to be. With some carriers, if you're married, there is a discount for long-term care. So they're still individual policies. So once you get divorced, if one spouse does not want to maintain it, the other spouse maintains the discount.
That's awesome.
So that's a planning thing that can be done before the divorce is signed off.
Wow. Good stuff, right? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the estate planning side. What are some of the vehicles that you can use to assist people? Because everybody wants to save on taxes, right?
Right.
And creating that legacy not only for themselves, but those
Okay.
that they love.
So on one end, if you are of a higher net worth, then using life insurance to pay the taxable estate liability component is the most efficient way of taking care of that. Right now, it's almost $14 million exemption. That's scheduled to drop to 6. So if someone is at $2 million, they may think they may not need it. But if they're in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, perhaps the value of the estate will grow. So that's one component. But the other part is a lot of people will say they don't need life insurance because their estate is too little. Well, number one, part of estate planning is to make sure that the kids or the charities or what have you get the assets that are so designed for. So consequently, it's important to have estate planning, whether you need the life insurance component to pay the estate tax or not. But even if you don't need it for estate tax purposes, life insurance structured properly is a tax-free benefit. So perhaps it allows parents to maybe spend more money while they are alive because they know what they're passing, their kids and grandkids and charities will be getting the life insurance benefit. So it's not necessarily only for the wealthy. It's just a way of being maybe more efficient with your dollars.
And you brought up a good point because I have 2 scenarios that both ended up in probate. One of them we talked about a little bit before about listing the beneficiaries, the owner, the insured. Unfortunately, people think, oh yeah, I have everything in place. I have my beneficiaries listed, and there could be a mistake that occurs that costs you because generally speaking, life insurance investments pass outside of probate. But if there's a little mistake, let's say the insured and the owner is also listed as the beneficiary, which is clearly was not the intent, then it has to go through probate. And then there's something too we were talking about the other day where the children, minor children, are put on their parents' policies as the beneficiaries. And God forbid something happens to the parent when the child is small, it's going to have to go through guardianship and potentially probate because of that. And so what would be advice that you can provide to the audience in a scenario like that? Of course, you may not trust your ex-spouse or trust whomever as a beneficiary, but putting your minor child as the beneficiary is not the answer.
That's correct. And unfortunately, many carriers, do not go deep enough as to the beneficiary designations. So my advice is if you currently have a policy with minor children as a beneficiary, whether they're primary or secondary, immediately get someone that you trust and make them the custodian so that they could be responsible for those funds so that you avoid the probate process per se. So yes, definitely do not put minor kids. And even if they're not minor, even if they're, reach the age of majority, as we call it, they may not have the capacity and the self-discipline and control to manage funds. So you have to be very careful. And then with any carrier, you can always change beneficiaries. So that's not set in stone.
Yeah.
So that's a thing that happens many times, not necessarily in the primary side, but in the secondary beneficiary side.
Wow.
Avoid probate at all costs.
Yes, very expensive for sure. And then you have the court looking on your every move. And I mean, no one wants to go through that when you have lost someone, you're grieving. That's a process in and of itself, and you don't want to complicate it even further.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Make sure you have an experienced professional like Lenny in life insurance to make sure you look at. If you don't have a policy, you need to talk about having a policy and what policy would be great for you, but also looking at what you have currently in place, if you already have something, to make sure things are outlined the way they should and the way you are desiring them to be. So Lenny, is there anything additional that you would like to add in regards to what you do and how you help families?
Well, I represent over 20 companies, which gives me the opportunity to really go down deep into the policies because you're an attorney. Policies by insurance companies cannot be changed. So the way that they're written, that's the contract. So you may have two carriers that offer the same, let's say, term policy, but one may have certain clauses that may be more beneficial to what your goals and objectives are. So by representing over 20 carriers, it gives me the ability to really get to know the client and based on the client's goals and objectives, find the right carrier and the right solution, for them. We use insurances for a lot of different reasons. So getting back to, let's say, you as an attorney, if you have a key person that works for you, there's different strategies to be able to retain that key employee using insurance policy. So you have to think outside the box that life insurance is just not only for death. It could be for tax efficiency. It could be for retaining key employees. And that's where I try to, work with my clients to get them to really let me know what their goals and objectives are to place the right solutions. And sometimes I have no solutions for them, depending on what they're trying to achieve. But more so than not, I do.
That's awesome. And what age? This is just a question that I thought of right now. What age should someone be when they obtain life insurance?
Frankly, getting children's policies is a wonderful thing. So for a child, they cannot get term because term is strictly only if they pass away. But for a child, you could structure permanent policies. And what that does is, number one, it allows for the cash value to grow over many more years. But just as important, things happen in life. And what if a child gets diagnosed with juvenile diabetes when they're 15 and it becomes much more difficult for them to become insurable, or worse yet, they're uninsurable? Well, by having the policies in place with opportunities to increase the benefit is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it doesn't matter what age. Obviously, most people think that when they're married and they have children, that to me is a no-brainer. From my perspective, doesn't necessarily mean that it's from your client's perspective. But yeah, there's always a good time to do planning, regardless of the age. And it's a wonderful thing to have a child. Maybe you award that permanent policy when they get married, and there's $50,000 in cash value. That's a really nice present to give a child. So you're guaranteeing future insurability without going through any medical underwriting.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's a win-win. It's an honorable industry. And like I said, it's been around for almost 200 years. Some of these carriers are almost 200 years old. So that's something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Lenny, for joining me. If you can share with the audience where they can find you,
Sure,
if they want more information about what you do and who you are.
Absolutely. So first of all, our tagline is, we don't predict, we prepare. We just want to make sure that everyone is on solid footing. I have a website. It's JLSFinancialGroup.com, and you can look me up there. And all my contact information is there.
Awesome. Thank you again for
You're
joining
welcome.
me. I appreciate it.
Welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And so it was another episode of Civility Wins, the Family Law Edition. I am Kristen Goss, founder and owner of KWG Family Legal and Mediation Services. We are your knowledgeable, warm, and gracious attorneys. Stay tuned for another episode. We'll see you next time. Take care.